As Russia approaches its third year of war with Ukraine, social media has become one of its most powerful weapons. Videos linked to Russian accounts are sprawling all over TikTok, urging young Ukrainians to dodge the draft of conscription. And with an army almost half the size of Russia's, the impact on Ukraine could be huge. So, will Ukraine have enough men to fight? And what is TikTok doing about it? I'm Lucrezia Millarini, and this is what you need to know. Hello and welcome to today's episode of What You Need to Know, and I'm joined by ITV News reporter George Hancorn and producer Lottie Kilraine. Before we get into the investigation, guys, Lottie, I just think it's worth outlining to our audience, what are the current rules around conscription in Ukraine?
So conscription in Ukraine, initially it was ages 27 to 60, all men, no women. In April this year, they actually lowered it to 25. Currently, women can fight in the front line, they can join the military, but they won't be conscripted.
It's worth knowing as well, there are a couple of exemptions that we've discovered from working on this piece. So if you've got kind of health reasons why you can't fight, you're exempt. Yeah. Perhaps if you have a member of your family who fought in the military and is no longer with us, then there could be an exemption there. Definitely Ukraine tightening some of those up where they can.
And as you say, 25 is the youngest age, so we're talking about a very young demographic at one end, aren't we? And I know, George, you've come across a series of videos and repeatedly coming up on young Ukrainians' TikTok feeds and trying to urge them not to fight and support their own country during this war.
Yeah, it's been really interesting looking at this. So we've worked with Ukrainian journalists. So we essentially used a Ukrainian SIM. So we were then able to use TikTok like we were in Ukraine ourselves, so we could kind of see what day-to-day Ukrainians will be seeing. Within just a couple of hours, we were shown these videos. A lot of them were very anti-Ukraine, pro-Russia, anti-conscription. So it might be offering a couple of reasons, a couple of ways to get out of being conscripted, by telling you how awful fighting for your country is, how awful patriotism is. But also we saw some videos that said that, you know, message me and I'll help you get out of conscription, send me a couple of £1,000 and I'll help you escape. And that was kind of concerning, but it wasn't the only thing by any means that we saw.
Yeah, so we saw quite a few trends. Obviously there's a lot of coverage, there's a lot of things that we could go into, but the sort of main things that we focused on was there was a sense of fear-mongering, there was a lot of discrediting of President Zelensky, of his cabinet, there was a lot of discussions of corruption within the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian government. There was also a lot of anti-Western narratives, so there was a lot of sort of pushing the idea that the international community doesn't care about Ukraine anymore, that they don't want to support Ukraine, that people don't like Ukraine, sort of just planting the seeds that no one really cares about Ukraine and that they're going to lose anyway, essentially.
Yeah. Are we seeing it's having any actual effect when it comes to numbers?
I mean, it's hard to know. Ukraine is in a position at the moment where, look, we're almost into its third winter. It needs troops, and its army is slightly smaller than Russia's own army. We've seen, people have seen videos online, potentially of North Korean soldiers helping Russia. So this comes at kind of a pivotal point. It's when Ukraine really needs people. So numbers need to rise. It's hard to know exactly how much these sorts of videos are having an impact, but obviously we've got anecdotal figures. We'll get on to talking about a soldier that we've spoken to who's on the front line, but from speaking to people, seeing the sort of comments on these videos, it's potentially having, or could have, quite a detrimental impact on Ukraine's numbers when it comes to fighting.
As you say, we're getting into the third winter of this war. Russia would not have expected it to have been going on for this long, and we said in the introduction there that this is perhaps their most powerful weapon now, the social media and what they can do and how they can influence.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that it's not new for Russia when it comes to using this sort of tool. We've seen it before. We've talked about it in the past when it comes to perhaps elections as well. But this was something that we hadn't really looked at, the impact that TikTok and these sorts of videos appearing on TikTok. Often we've seen them on other platforms. But when you think about the age of people being conscripted, 25, they're using TikTok quite a lot. So yeah, definitely have an impact.
George, you mentioned that you spoke to one Ukrainian soldier who has been on the front line about all of this. So what did he make of it? What did he tell you?
So he was a 33-year-old on the front line, a drone operator. We called him Hacker. That was the name we used. And actually, we had initially quite a few struggles trying to get through to him because of where he was.
Yeah, so he was actually on the front line. We had to interview him over video call. We can't disclose exactly where he was for safety reasons, but he was essentially saying that even on the front line, he can't escape it. He had gone as far as to delete it off his phone. He was quite aware of it, but he was still struggling to ignore it because he had friends, family, other members of his unit showing him these videos. And he said it was really difficult, and it definitely was having an impact on his sort of beliefs.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
And draft dodging is this phrase that people may have been familiar with. So if people want to try and dodge the draft, that's essentially trying to escape being conscripted. And this is the phrase that came up a lot when we were talking to him, was that these sorts of videos are like our draft dodging videos showing you how to, like I said earlier, escape the draft, pay thousands of pounds to try and get out of conscription. So although he's deleted the app, you know, he tried to avoid a lot of those videos, and it ultimately meant, right, I'm going to have to delete this because otherwise I'm going to potentially be influenced by these videos and change my views, and that is a concern. And you know, we don't know what his friends have done. He talked to his friends, and he said spoke to his friends and said they'd seen some of these videos, but obviously they're probably still seeing quite a lot of these.
Well, what about other Ukrainians, part of the wider population, not just those who are actually on the front line?
So what's interesting with the videos that we found is that although the numbers of videos on TikTok compared to other platforms like Telegram, they are smaller. There are fewer of these sorts of videos just on the small sample that we've seen, but engagement is up. So engagement is stuff like likes, shares, comments. That's actually pretty high. So although the numbers of the videos might be relatively small in comparison to other platforms, they're being engaged with quite a lot. And even if a large proportion of those people are saying, you know what, don't believe this, it's not legit, there's still going to be relatively, potentially, decent numbers who are maybe believing some of this stuff.
You know, Lottie, whenever we talk about anything to do with social media and the platforms, we have to ask, well, what are the platforms themselves doing about this? What are TikTok doing?
So yeah, we reached out to TikTok directly, and we actually sent them the videos that we had found. Obviously, it's a selection, but we put together the amount that sort of paints the picture of it. And we asked them to comment, and they did send us a response, actually. Yeah,
they did. So they told us that they have taken aggressive action to combat misinformation related to the war in Ukraine. They've also said that they launched a media literacy campaign, that's easy for me to say, to help people spot misinformation. It's worth also knowing TikTok do have something called a transparency report. So you or I could go online now and have a look at that, and it basically flags any number of accounts or group of accounts that they've removed that are flouting their rules. So recently they dismantled a network of almost 20,000 accounts that they found to be operating from Russia. That's what they told us, and they said it was undermining the Ukrainian territorial recruitment. So obviously they're actively looking at this sort of stuff and removing it, but the videos that we found, you know, were obviously still on the platform.
Up there. Yeah. Finally, as well, you know, you mentioned interference in politics, in elections. Are we seeing these online tactics being used elsewhere?
Well, Russia is pretty good at this.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of this in the past, and like beyond the stuff that we're looking at, we're obviously approaching a US election. We've talked about in previous years potential Russian influence. There is something called Maiden 3, which was a £1 billion campaign by Russia a couple of months back. And that was all to essentially help remove Zelensky. You may have noticed he's still in power, so it hasn't actually worked. But they are spending a lot of money on these sorts of campaigns. So they know what they're doing when it comes to this.
Yeah, well, listen, it is a war and a whole new front, that is for sure. George and Lottie, thank you. Fascinating to talk to you about this and hear more. And just to say thank you, everyone, for listening and for watching. For more on this, head over to our website or to ITVX, and of course, have a look back through our other quick briefings on a range of headline topics to find out what you need to know. Until the next time, thank you.